Hey guys, I am coming at you again with one of the most bizarre stories I've came across so far doing these headstone cleanings and research on individuals. I've currently been researching the Romines family. I found a few of these in my family tree, and a number of them buried in Stoke Cemetery, where the majority of my ancestors are buried. So I've been looking into the Romines family, and I came across this strange story, and it leads to a an event of several deaths and murders, and it's just strange and confusing all around. So while I'm working on Mr. Frank Romine's headstone, I'm just gonna dive into the facts that I've found so far. This headstone is pretty caked in a thick black substance, so it's probably going to take several cleanings for me to get it cleaned up. But while I'm working on this first round, I'm going to go ahead and dive into this story. Frank was born in 1896, and he was the son of Lee Romines and Louisa Leigh Romines. Searching through his lifespan, I find that in 1900 and 1910, the family were living in Whitley, Kentucky. And by 1920, they were living in Campbell County, Tennessee. And in 1930, Frank was still living with his parents in Campbell County in the Vasper community. Frank passed away in 1933, and while looking into his cause of death, that's where I uncovered a strange series of events. On Frank's death certificate, it states that he was found dead on railroad tracks in the Vasper community. That is his cause of death on his death certificate. Now, when I dig deeper into this death, I came across some newspaper articles, and these are from 1940, so it was quite a few years after Frank's death. But it was a lady by the name of Meryl McCoy, and she was confessing to killing her mother in hopes to inherit her mother's welfare checks of $16 a month. And during this confession, she stated that she had help of her friend Sterling Jack Wells. She said that, it's Walls, not Wells. And she'd stated that Mr. Walls was pretty knowledgeable in how to get rid of people because he had done it several times in the past. And she mentioned the killing of Frank Romines and also a killing of Jack or Clyde, Everett Clyde Jack Hatmaker in 1940. So looking through the records, I found that Jack Walls was actually, in fact, convicted of killing Frank. He was convicted in 1938 and sentenced to 10 years, 18 months of which he served for killing Frank. I have no idea what the reason or motives or anything behind Frank's death was. I may end up having to go to the courthouse and see if I can find records that way. But as far as the reason he killed Frank Romines, I don't know. But according to this confession, Mr. Walls had a particular way that he liked to get rid of people, and that being getting them drunk and knocking them in the head with some sort of object, and leaving their body on the railroad tracks to make it look like the train had ran over them. Now, Miss McCoy had killed her mother by giving her a lie. putting lye in her drink and killing her in hopes to inherit her welfare checks. And her cause of death, her mother's cause of death, was determined to be accidental, and years had went on by before she finally confessed while intoxicated to friends that she had in fact killed her mom. And then when police questioned her, then that's when all this other information came forward. She talked about the killing of Frank Romines as well as Mr. Hatmaker. Now, when I look into Mr. Hatmaker's death, that's when things started getting very strange. Mr. Hatmaker was found in 1940 on the railroad tracks, just the same as Frank Romines was. But there was actually a motive to that one, but that murder actually went unsolved, and no one was ever sentenced for that. But apparently, the death of Mr. Hatmaker stemmed back to 1939 from the death of Osby Martin. From what I'm gathering on the newspaper articles, Osby Martin was he was born in New River in Scott County, Tennessee, and he was living in Duff, Tennessee. And Osby was out hunting in 1939, and he came across the moonshine still that apparently belonged to Mr. Hatmaker. This ultimately led to the death of Osby. Osby was killed, and I'll put up a article, one of the newspaper articles. I guess his death was pretty brutal. He was shot and then had boiling beer poured all over his body, even in his ears. And he was found dying, covered with boiling water. And it was said that Mr. Hatmaker had done so due to the moonshine still. So, to get even, Miss Martin had apparently offered to pay Mr. Walls 4 gallons of whiskey to take care of Mr. Hatmaker. And then Mr. Hatmaker was found in 1940 on the railroad tracks. From what I can tell, no one was ever charged with Mr. Hatmaker's murder, nor were they charged with Osby's murder either. Those two just remain unsolved or wrote up as natural causes, what have you. So we have the death of Frank Romines in 1933. Frank is buried in the Vasper community with his father, Lee, and his brother, Lloyd. And we have the death of Osby Martin in 1939. It said that he is buried in Peabody Cemetery, but I can't find that he has a headstone, so I don't think he ever had a headstone. Then we have the death of Mr. Hatmaker. He died in 1940, and he is buried in the Grantsboro community. And we have the death of Miss Nanny, or Maggie Adams. She was the mother of Meryl McCoy. She is buried in Ivydale Cemetery, and I don't think she has a headstone either. And I can't find what happened with Meryl McCoy. If she ended up ultimately serving time, since she did actually confess to her mother's death. I'm not really sure what happened with her, because I think at that point she was in Indiana and she was no longer in Tennessee. But I'm not sure what the result of her confession on killing her mother turned out to be. But from this whole series of deaths, from what I'm finding, the only actual conviction was for the death of Mr. Romines, and Mr. Wall served 18 months of his 10-year sentence and was released for killing Frank. And I'm still not really sure of the reason behind Frank's death. In my mind, I'm thinking there's a possibility that since they were both single, it may have been, a dispute about a girl, because then the following year it looked like Mr. Walls got married. And I'm basing this story again on newspaper articles and, various census records and such. So, my opinions and this story is based on solely on that, and I'm not trying to, talk bad about anybody's ancestors or in any way belittle anyone for events that happened in the 1930s and 40s. So if there's any descendants of any of these people out there, that's not what I'm trying to do. And if you have information, please share it with me. I'd like to know the actual, details of especially Frank's Romines death. I'd like to know what actually was the motive behind that. And as I go through all these stories and cleaning these headstones up, I've came to the conclusion that Campbell County was a pretty rough place to live in the early 1900s. It was pretty busy and booming. There was a lot of coal mining and a lot of jobs in the area, and a lot of moonshining and feuds and disputes and shootings and killings and a lot of unsolved cases back then. I don't think that I would have wanted to live in Campbell County in those times. I will definitely be back at a later time if nothing else, just to update on the cleaning of Mr. Romine's headstone, because like I said, it's going to take a couple of cleanings to get rid of all this black substance off the headstone, and I'll give an update on the completed version of this headstone. And if I've found any more facts on the story, I'll share those with you guys as well. I've got a lot more stories to come. I've got a whole notebook full of strange and unusual stories that I've come across doing research. So I'm going to be sharing quite a few in the future. So if you like this type of story and restoration of headstones, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And I'm going to have plenty more stories to come.